Most people live their entire lives inside a lie and never even realize it. Not because they're stupid, not because they're weak, but because the truth is too dangerous to let in. And here's the real problem. Life isn't just testing your character, it's testing whether you can actually see what's unfolding around you. Because the moment you truly understand how the game works, everything begins to shift. The betrayal you never understood, the moments you felt replaced, the times you thought life was unfair, suddenly they start aligning. And that's exactly what someone like Machiavelli discovered after losing everything. Not the caricature you've seen repeated online, not the simplified villain people quote without understanding. The real man, the one who was stripped of power, accused, imprisoned, tortured, then exiled to a quiet farm outside Florence, where reputations don't just vanish, they vanish. And strangely, this is where his thinking becomes dangerous, because most philosophies are written from comfort. His was written after comfort had been completely stripped away. In 1513, Machiavelli was living in forced obscurity after the Medici returned and dismantled the republic he had served for years. One day he was moving among diplomats, rulers, and military leaders, and almost overnight he became politically irrelevant. His office disappeared, his influence disappeared, his future uncertain. He was imprisoned, tortured, then released not into freedom, but into something slower, a kind of living erasure. And yet something unexpected happened. That winter, he wrote a letter to Francesco Vittori describing his days with an almost unsettling calm. During daylight, he dealt with trivial problems, arguments over land, petty disputes, tavern noise, dust, boredom, small humiliations that quietly erode a man's identity. Nothing dignified, nothing extraordinary. But then evening arrived, and everything shifted. He would return home, step into his study, remove the dust of the day, dress himself in formal garments, and mentally enter what he called the courts of ancient men. That image reveals more than any theory ever could, because it shows you this. He lost position, but refused to lose form. He lost status, but refused to become internally empty. While the world quietly erased him, he began writing one of the sharpest analyses ever created on power, perception, fear, ambition, and survival. Not to sound ruthless, but because reality had stopped allowing him illusions. And here's where most people misunderstand him. They think he wrote about princes. He didn't. He wrote about what human beings become when pressure reveals them. Courts were just his laboratory. His real subject was deeper: desire, fear, status, uncertainty, survival. What happens when those forces collide inside a person? And that's why centuries later, his work still feels uncomfortably precise. You read him and begin recognizing people you know, your manager, your partner,
A friend who changed the moment the hierarchy shifted, or worse, a version of yourself you barely want to confront. Because he isn't describing a distant era, he's describing the invisible forces that still decide who gets ignored, who gets used, who gets protected, and who quietly learns to stop expecting fairness. The first shock he delivers is simple, but most people resist it for years. Life does not consistently reward good intentions. It rewards alignment with reality. That sounds harsh until you notice how often the opposite belief quietly destroys people. A man assumes loyalty will naturally be recognized, so he never learns to make his value visible. A woman absorbs disrespect, convinced patience will eventually be understood, that depth will be rewarded. An employee works silently, believing competence will speak for itself, while others construct narratives around their own contributions. And then, one day, the promotion goes elsewhere, the relationship collapses under imbalance, the room quietly adjusts around someone else, and the same sentence appears again and again. I don't understand. I did everything right. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You followed an internal script. The world was grading a completely different exam. Machiavelli understood something most people spend years avoiding. One of the most painful forms of suffering isn't cruelty, it's misreading the rules. Because once you misread the rules, everything begins to feel personal. Every setback feels like an insult. Every betrayal feels like an exception. Every power shift feels like injustice. Because you're still operating under a quiet assumption that the world is designed to match intention with outcome. Do good, receive good. Be sincere, be understood. Work hard, be rewarded. Love deeply, be protected. Sometimes that happens, but not reliably enough to build your life on. And what breaks people isn't just the loss, it's the collapse of that assumption. So what did Machiavelli see instead? Something colder, but far more useful. Under pressure, people don't move according to your moral expectations. They move according to self-interest, fear, convenience, and incentive. Not because they're evil, because that's the structure. Watch closely and you'll see it everywhere. The friend who values loyalty until your weakness becomes inconvenient. The colleague who praises teamwork until blame enters the room. The partner who asks for honesty, then punishes it the moment it threatens their emotional control. The family member who loves you as long as your growth doesn't disrupt the old hierarchy. No villains required, just pressure.
That's why Machiavelli's darker observations are often misunderstood. When he describes people as fickle or self-serving, he isn't being dramatic, he's being precise. He's trying to pull you out of something dangerous, sentimental blindness. People are often loyal, not to principles, but to conditions. They're generous when generosity costs nothing. Loyal when loyalty is convenient, stable when stability benefits them. Then something shifts and they appear to change overnight. But they didn't change, the environment did, and you were attached to behavior that had never been tested. Think about the smaller moments, the ones most people overlook. You walk into a room, relaxed, open, unguarded. Someone interrupts you just slightly too often. A joke lands at your expense, followed by a glance around the room. Messages become selective, clear when you're needed, vague when you're not. Your status shifts, not dramatically, just enough to test you. And this is where things quietly break. Most people react in a way that costs them everything. They over-explain, they rush to restore harmony, they reveal the wound immediately. And the moment that need becomes visible, control slips from their hands. Machiavelli saw these moments not as accidents, but as constant unspoken tests. But the real problem isn't what you think. It's not just that people are selfish. That explanation is too shallow. The deeper issue is this. Most people enter life morally sincere, but strategically blind. They confuse honesty with clarity. They believe sincerity replaces the need to understand power. They see detachment as coldness, visibility as vanity, silence as weakness, and then they wonder why stronger frames keep absorbing them. The real cost isn't just what others do, it's failing to recognize that every environment has a psychology. And if you don't learn to read it, you will spend your life being interpreted by those who do. This is where Machiavelli introduces a distinction that changes everything: virtù and fortune. Virtù isn't moral goodness, it's something sharper, the ability to read reality accurately, to adapt, to act decisively.
To endure pressure without collapsing, to shape circumstances instead of being shaped by them. And fortune? It's everything unstable. Timing, chance, illness, opportunity, loss, chaos, the part of life that doesn't care about your plans. Machiavelli's insight is unsettling. You can't control it, but you can prepare for it. He compares fortune to a violent river, and the image is exact. The flood doesn't hate you. It doesn't need a reason. It simply arrives. Some people meet it unprepared, built on fragile identities, borrowed confidence, and surface-level stability. Others meet it with structure already in place, skill, discipline, emotional control, a reputation built slowly, relationships that have been tested, the ability to lose a role without losing themselves. Same event, completely different outcome, because one was built and one was not. Look closely at life and you'll see it. Someone loses a job and realizes their confidence was rented. Someone experiences heartbreak and discovers their identity depended entirely on being chosen. Someone moves and realizes their social ease depended on familiarity. And then there are those who endure the same things and remain intact because something deeper was already there. Fortune always asks one question. When the surface breaks, what remains? Machiavelli's answer is simple. Construction. Not illusion, not hope. Construction. Because the real divide isn't between success and failure. It's between structure and exposure. He saw it in history. And if you look carefully at life, you'll see it in yourself. And maybe that's the part that lingers. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that leaves you with a quieter, more uncomfortable question. If the conditions around you change tomorrow, what version of you would be revealed?